beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of Energize Your Passion. I'm your host, Sunshine, and as always, we're here to empower, inspire, and lift you up. Today, we're diving into a fascinating question that's been on many people's mind as they age. Is marriage still desired after 50? Or is it more about companionship? Now, we're not talking about marriage like in your 20s or 30s, but how things shift later in life when you've been through experiences, gained wisdom, and maybe your perspective has changed. So buckle in, grab a cup of coffee, or settle into your favorite chair because this is going to be a deep, insightful, and of course, fun conversation about love, relationships, and what matters most when you're over 50. Segment 1, the evolution of a marriage after 50. Let's start by talking about how marriage has evolved for people over 50. Back in the day, marriage was often seen as the ultimate goal, a life partnership to last forever. Many of us grew up with the expectation that marriage was the pinnacle of love and commitment. You meet someone, fall in love, and get married with the intention that is till death do us part. For generations, that was the script, and for many, it worked beautifully. But as we've grown, matured, and learned more about ourselves, the ideal of marriage can take on different meanings as we age. You see, we don't remain the same people throughout our lives, and it's natural that our views on relationships and marriage evolve too. At 50, 60, or beyond, many of us have lived through long marriages, divorces, or the loss of a spouse. Our experiences, both good and bad, shape our perspectives on what love, partnership, and commitment mean to us now. It's no longer about fitting into the mold that society created for us. It's about what fits our lives, what feels right at this stage. Take Carol, one of our listeners. Carol was married for 30 years, but after her divorce at 52, she found herself rethinking the ideal of a marriage. She said, I don't need to be married again to feel complete. I want a partner who I can enjoy life with, someone who gets me, but doesn't need a piece of paper to prove it. Now, how many of us can relate to that? Carol's story is a reflection of a common sentiment. After being in a long marriage, some of us feel like we've done the hard work and don't necessarily need to go down that road again. For Carol, it's about companionship now, not marriage in the traditional sense. She's still open to love, but it looks different than it did in her 20s or 30s. But at the same time, I got an email from Martin, who at 58 found love again after losing his wife. He told me, for me, getting married again isn't just about companionship. It's about committing to share the rest of my life with someone special. Marriage still means something to me, even after all I've been through. Isn't that beautiful? For Martin, marriage is still a symbol of a deeper commitment. He recognizes that love in your latter years can be just as powerful, if not more so, than love in your younger years. There's a sense of urgency and intention behind it. After experiencing loss, Martin views marriage as a way to fully immerse himself in the love he's found again. It's not just about having someone by your side. It's about creating a new chapter together. So we can see that marriage after 50 has so many different interpretations depending on our personal journeys. It's no longer a one-size-fits-all situation. Some of us have been there, done that, and feel content with companionship. Others feel a deep yearning to commit again, perhaps with a fresh perspective. There's no right or wrong way to approach this stage of your life. It's about listening to what your heart needs. Let me tell you about Rita. She shared with me how after her first marriage ended, she was convinced she would never remarry. But at 55, she met someone who changed her mind. She told me it wasn't about starting over. It was about continuing life's journey with someone who brought out the best in me. That's such a profound way to look at it, isn't it? For Rita, remarriage wasn't about starting from scratch or trying to recreate her past. It was about finding someone who complemented where she was in life, who enhanced her journey rather than defining it. I think a lot of people fear that remarrying later in life means they'll have to compromise too much or give up their independence. But Rita's story shows us that when it's right, it's not about losing anything. It's about gaining a deeper connection that aligns with who you are now. Then there's Mike. Mike told me, marriage isn't for me at this point. What I want is connection without all the legalities. He found happiness in a long-term companionship without the formalities, and he's never been happier. Mike's perspective is becoming more and more common, especially in the over 50 crowd. There's something liberating about choosing a partnership that's defined by mutual respect, love, and connection, without feeling the need to formalize it with marriage. After decades of possibly navigating the complexity of marriage, legal issues, or divorces, some people feel like they've done the marriage thing and now just want peace and simplicity in their relationships. For Mike, it's not about a certificate or legal status. It's about being with someone who shares the same values, interests, and love without the pressure of a legal framework. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. These stories, Carol, Martin, Rita, and Mike, are just a few examples of how people are redefining what relationships look like in this chapter of their life. Marriage can mean commitment, stability, or even just familiarity. Companionship, on the other hand, can offer flexibility, freedom, and a deep emotional connection without the traditional trappings of marriage. What's key here is recognizing that after 50, we get to redefine what love and partnership means on our own terms. The societal pressures that were so strong when we were younger, get married, stay married, have kids, buy a house, are no longer the driving force. Now it's about choice. It's about asking yourself, what do I really want in this phase of my life? And that answer can be so different for each of us. For some, marriage offers a renewed sense of commitment and partnership. For others, it's about finding someone to travel with, laugh with, and enjoy life's simple pleasures. What I love most about this evolution is that there's no judgment. No one way is better than the other. It's all about what works for you. And I think it's important to talk about how society has shifted in its perspective of marriage, especially for older adults. Decades ago, there was almost an expectation that if you were over 50 and single, you were either widowed or something had gone wrong. But now, being single and over 50, or even being in a relationship without being married, is not just accepted, it's celebrated. We see so many examples in pop culture, social media, and even our own circle of people who are redefining what love looks like at every age. Whether it's remarriage, companionship, or choosing to stay single, the stigma around how we should live our later years is fading away. Another point worth mentioning is how important it is to be clear about your intentions in this stage of life. When we're younger, there's often this assumption that relationships are building towards marriage. But after 50, it's more about open communication. Are you looking for a committed partnership that leads to marriage? Or are you looking for a deep, meaningful connection without the formality of marriage? These are conversations that need to happen early on so everyone's on the same page. And that's the beauty of being older and wiser. We know ourselves better and we're more equipped to have those honest discussions. I think it's also important to acknowledge that the pressures and priorities we had earlier in life have shifted. When we're in our 20s, 30s, or even 40s, there's often an emphasis on building a family, buying a home, or establishing a career. Those goals can shape our relationships, and for many, marriage is a part of that equation. But after 50, those pressures ease. The focus can shift to enjoying life, and relationships are about companionship, connection, and support, whether or not marriage is part of the picture. So in this segment, we're really just scratching the surface of how people view marriage after 50. For some, it's about commitment. For others, it's about companionship. But it's all about what brings peace and joy to your life. The beauty of this stage is that we get to make choices based on what feels right for us, without the societal pressures we may have felt when we were younger. What do you think, folks? What does marriage mean to you after 50? Do you see it as a symbol of commitment? Are you more inclined towards companionship without the legal ties? Let's keep exploring this as we move on to the next part of the episode. Segment 2, the emotional shift. What do we really need? Now, let's dig a little deeper into the emotional shift we experience after 50. What do we really need from a relationship at this stage of life? Is it the traditional marriage, or do we crave something different? It's interesting how our emotional landscape evolves as we age, isn't it? Our needs in our 50s, 60s, and beyond are often a reflection of the lessons we've learned and the experiences we've lived through. For many of us, this stage of life isn't about the societal expectations or conventional roles we may have adhered to earlier in our lives. It's about what we truly want and need. I was chatting with a listener, Debbie, who shared something that really struck a chord with me. She said, at 55, I don't want to take care of someone like I did in my marriage. I want someone who can meet me where I am. No caretaking, just mutual respect and love. That's such a powerful statement. It speaks to the fact that as we get older, our emotional needs shift. We're no longer looking for the same things we did in our 20s or 30s. Back then, many of us were in relationships where caretaking, whether emotional, physical, or even financial, was a significant part of the dynamic. We might have felt the pressure to be everything to our partners, the nurturer, the provider, the problem solver. But as we age, we start to recognize that what we need is less about caretaking and more about finding a relationship built on equality and mutual support. Debbie's desire for a relationship that's rooted in respect and love without the weight of caretaking is something that resonated with so many people over 50. We've done the work. Now we just want someone to walk beside us, not someone who needs us to carry the load. Take Robert, for example. Robert is 62, and he's in a relationship where both partners are happy just being together without ever talking about marriage. He said, "We have a connection that's deeper than any marriage certificate could ever define." Robert's story is a great reminder that sometimes we don't need the formalities of marriage to experience a deep and meaningful connection. For him and his partner, their emotional bond is strong enough without the need to put a label on it. It's about companionship, trust, and understanding each other at a core level. They've chosen to focus on being present in the relationship without the pressure of traditional expectations, and for them, that's what feels right. Isn't it interesting how the emotional connection between the priority becomes the priority? It's not about the wedding or the legalities. It's about being with someone who truly gets you. When you reach this stage in life, that kind of understanding and emotional connection is priceless. Now, on the flip side, there's Karen. Karen, 53, remarried recently and told me, "I never thought I'd get married again. But I realize I still want that lifelong commitment. For me, it's about creating a shared life with someone, even at this stage." Karen's story highlights that while some people are happy without marriage, others still long for that sense of commitment and a shared life. Karen thought she was done with marriage, but when she found the right person, she realized she wanted to take that step again. It wasn't about recreating the past or fulfilling an old dream. It was about creating a new future with someone she felt deeply connected to. The desire for marriage, even later in life, can be just as strong as it was in our younger years. But now it comes from a place of wisdom and self-awareness. The truth is, what we need emotionally evolves as we go through different stages in life. Sometimes marriage doesn't have to be the end goal. It's the connection and the companionship that matters most. For some, like Robert, the emotional connection is enough without marriage. For others like Karen, marriage is still something they want as a way to solidify that connection. This emotional shift we experience after 50 is often about focusing on what truly matters to us as individuals. It's less about fulfilling someone else's expectations or fitting into society's mold and more about honesty. This emotional shift we experience after 50 is often about focusing on what truly matters to us as individuals. It's less about filling someone else's expectations or fitting into society's mold and more about being honest with ourselves. Do we want marriage or do we simply want companionship? Do we need the formal commitment or is a deep emotional bond enough? These are questions that only we can answer for ourselves. I think it's important to recognize that the emotional shift doesn't just happen overnight. It's about something that builds over time as we gain more life experience and become more in tune with our own needs. In our younger years, we might have been more focused on building a life, raising kids, establishing careers, and creating stability. But as we age, our priorities shift. We start to look at relationships through a different lens. It's not so much about building a life anymore. It's about sharing the life we've already built. And that can change everything about how we approach relationships. So as we continue, I want you to think about what you really need in this phase of your life. Is it marriage? Or is it simply a loving, supportive companion? Do you crave the formal commitment? Or is the emotional connection enough to sustain you? These are personal questions, And there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what feels right to you. As we age, we also become more aware of our boundaries and what we will and won't tolerate in relationships. This emotional clarity is one of the beautiful things about getting older. We've been through enough to know what works for us and what doesn't. We know when to walk away and when to hold on. And that emotional maturity allows us to form healthier, more fulfilling connections, whether they result in marriage or not. We also have the wisdom to understand that relationships in any form requires work and effort, but the type of work we're willing to put in changes. Earlier in life, we might be willing to make sacrifices or compromises that no longer make sense for us. Now it's about finding someone who complements our lives and adds value without requiring us to give up parts of ourselves. That's the emotional shift that so many of us experience after 50. We've done the work on ourselves, and now we're looking for relationships that enhance who we are, not ones that drain us. As we wrap up this segment, I want to leave you with this thought. What do you need emotionally at this stage in your life? Whether it's marriage, companionship, or simply a deep connection without the formalities. The most important thing is that you are true to yourself. As we continue this conversation, keep that question in mind. What do you really need from a relationship right now? Let's move on to our next segment, where we'll dive deeper into the ideal of commitment and what it looks like after 50. Segment 3, the practical side of marriage versus companionship. All right, let's get practical. We all know that marriage brings certain legal and financial benefits, but after 50, many people are asking, is it worth it? Are there practical reasons to marry? Or are we just as well off staying companions? This is such an interesting conversation to have because as we age, our priorities shift and practical consideration often takes center stage. In our 20s or 30s, marriage might have been about building a life together, raising children, buying a house, and growing a family. But once we hit our 50s and beyond, many of those things are already in place. So the question becomes, what does marriage bring to the table now? One of our listeners, George, shared an interesting perspective that got me thinking. He said, after 60, I don't care about the legal stuff. I just want someone to share my time with. Marriage complicates things, especially financially. We're better off just staying partners. You see, George isn't against marriage. He's looking at it from a very practical standpoint. At this stage in his life, he values simplicity. He's already built his financial and legal structures, and he doesn't want the complexity that comes sometime with marriage, especially when it comes to things like dividing assets, dealing with taxes, and navigating legal entanglements. For George, companionship is enough. He found someone to share his life with, and that's what matters most to him. It's a sentiment that I think most people can relate to. But then there's Anna. Anna is 57 and recently married for the second time. She has a very different outlook from George. She shared with me, there are tax benefits, healthcare considerations, and legal reasons to marry. It's not the most romantic reason to tie the knot, but it made sense for us. And I get it. I get it. When you look at it practically, there are clear financial and legal advantages to being married, especially later in life. Things like spousal social security benefits, inheritance rights, and even making medical decisions for each other. These are all significant factors that can influence the decision to marry. Anna and her partner made a choice that wasn't necessarily about romance, but about ensuring they were both protected and set up for the future. And while that might sound unromantic, it's also a deeply loving gesture, isn't it? It really is. Making decisions to secure each other's futures is a form of love in itself. Lydia, 61, said something that really struck me. She shared marriage after 50 is less about passion and more about partnership. It's practical, sure, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. Lydia's perspective is really insightful because it highlights the fact that marriage can take on a different tone later in life. It's not that passion disappears, but the focus shifts to partnership. In many ways, it's a deeper form of connection, one where two people come together not just for love, but for mutual support, care, and companionship. Lydia recognizes that there are practical reasons for marriage, but that doesn't diminish the emotional significance of the commitment. It's still meaningful, it's still important, and it's still a choice made from a place of love and respect. Marriage after 50 can be about practicality, but it's also about finding someone who walks alongside you, sharing life's ups and downs. Even if the reason for marriage evolves, the core of the commitment remains rooted in the desire to share your life with someone. And then there's Tom. Tom's been with his partner for over a decade, and he's perfectly content with our marriage. He told me, "We don't need to be married. The bond we've formed is stronger than any legal contract." Tom's story reminds us that you don't need a marriage certificate to have a strong, lasting relationship. For him, the commitment is there, the bond is there, but the legalities just aren't necessary. He built a life with his partner, and they've found happiness and companionship without the need for a formal marriage. In some ways, Tom's view challenges the traditional notion that marriage is the pinnacle of commitment. For him, the emotional bond he shares with his partner is more meaningful than a legal contract could ever be. So there is no right or wrong answer here. It really comes down to what makes sense for you personally, emotionally, and practically. There's beauty in both marriage and companionship, and there are unique benefits to each. I think what's fascinating is how people weigh these practical considerations differently. For some, like Anna, marriage provides security and peace of mind. For others, like George and Tom, companionship is enough. They don't need the legal benefits of marriage to feel secure or fulfilled. But whatever choice you make, it's important that it aligns with what you need at this stage of your life. One thing to keep in mind is that the legal and financial landscape changes as we age. Things like retirement plans, pensions, healthcare costs, and even estate planning becomes more prominent considerations. Marriage might provide certain protections, like being able to make healthcare decisions for your spouse, inheriting assets without going through probate, or sharing Social Security benefits. But if you're not married, it's important to have things like a will, a healthcare directive, and other legal documents in place to ensure your wishes are honored. On the other hand, staying companions without marriage offers a level of independence that some people value. It's a way to maintain financial autonomy while still enjoying a deep, committed relationship. And for some, that freedom is what makes companionship more appealing than marriage. You can still share your life with someone without blending finances or complicating legal matters. It's all about what feels right for you and your partner. Another practical consideration is how marriage or companionship impacts your family dynamics. Many people who marry after 50 have adult children, and blending families can sometimes create challenges. For some, staying companions allow them to maintain their family dynamics without introducing legal or financial complications that marriage might bring. For others, marriage creates a sense of stability and unity that brings families closer together. Again, it's all about what works best for you and your unique situation. So as we wrap up this segment, I want you to take a moment to think about what's important to you in a relationship at this stage of your life. Are the legal and financial benefits of marriage something that resonates with you? Or do you prefer the independence that comes with companionship? Either way, there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what makes sense for you. Whether you choose marriage or companionship, the most important thing is that you find a relationship that makes you happy and meets your needs. Let's move on to our next segment, where we'll dive into how people approach love and commitment after 50. Segment 4, the social perception, breaking the stigma. Let's talk about what society tells us about marriage after 50. There can be some pressure, right? People might say, why aren't you married? Or even, aren't you lonely? We've all heard it before. It's this underlying notion that if you're not married or remarried by a certain age, then somehow you're missing out or incomplete. But guess what? Times are changing. More and more people are challenging the traditional ideals of what a fulfilled life looks like after 50. For a long time, there was this societal ideal that you had to be married to be fulfilled. And for many, that pressure was real. You'll see couples growing old together, and the assumption was that if you didn't have that, you was missing something. But these days, we're rewriting that narrative. People are realizing that marriage is not the only path to happiness. Fulfillment can come in many forms, whether it's companionship, personal growth, or simply enjoying your own company. Take Gloria, a 58-year-old listener who shared her journey with us. She told me, I've been single for 10 years and I've never felt more at peace. Society tells us we need a partner, but I've found fulfillment in myself. Gloria's story is such a powerful reminder that being single doesn't equate to being lonely. In fact, for many, it's a time of self-discovery, independence, and finding peace within. There's a kind of beauty in being able to enjoy your own company and not feeling pressured to conform to what others expect. Gloria has found her happiness, and it doesn't look like the traditional image of a married couple in their golden years. And that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's liberating. Another listener, Rick, shared his story, which is quite different from Gloria's, but carries a similar message. He said, I was married for 25 years. After my divorce, I felt pressured to find someone new. But over time, I realized I don't need to get married again. I'm happy with companionship, and that's enough for me. Rick's story touches on something a lot of people experience after a long marriage ends. There's this societal expectation that you should get back out there or find someone new. And while some people do find love again and remarry, others like Rick come to the realization that marriage isn't the ultimate goal for them anymore. He's content with companionship, someone to share his life with without the need for the formalities of marriage. It's about living on his own terms, and he's found peace in that. No more pressure to fit into a mold or follow a timeline that society has set. What I love about both Gloria and Rick's story is that They show us how people over 50 are redefining what it means to live a fulfilled life, whether it's finding peace in being single or enjoying companionship without the need for marriage. The key is that they're both doing what makes them happy without worrying about what society thinks. It's not always easy to go against the grain, especially when the world seems to be telling you that marriage is the ultimate marker of success or happiness. But these stories remind us that fulfillment comes in many forms. I think it's important to acknowledge how far we've come as a society, too. While there's still some pressure to conform, there's also more acceptance now than there used to be. We're seeing more people openly living their truth, whether that means staying single, choosing companionship without marriage, or even remarrying later in life. Then there's Sarah, 54, who remarried last year. She told me, I got a lot of strange looks when I told people I was remarrying at my age. But guess what? I've never been happier. You've got to do what's right for you, no matter what others think. Sarah's story is an important reminder that even when you do decide to remarry after 50, there can still be stigma attached. People might assume that marriage is a young person's game, or if you've been single for a while, there's no point in tying the knot again. But for Sarah, remarrying brought her joy, and she didn't let the strange looks or comments from others get in her way. She knew what was right for her, and she went for it. And that's the message I want to leave you with in this segment. Whether you choose to marry again, stay single, or enjoy companionship without marriage, it's all about doing what's right for you. You know, the beauty of this time in life, being in your 50s and beyond, is that you've lived enough to know yourself. You've experienced different relationships, different stages of life, and you've probably had your fair share of societal pressures telling you what you should or shouldn't do. But now you get to make the rules. Whether you want to get married or prefer companionship, it's about your happiness. And I think we're seeing this more and more, not just with individuals, but with society as a whole. The ideal that you need to be married by a certain age, or that being single means you're lonely, is starting to fade. People are realizing that happiness looks different for everyone, and it's not something that can be defined by societal expectations. Some of us find happiness in marriage, while others find it in friendships, travel, hobbies, or simply in our own company, and that's something to celebrate. So I want to encourage you to think about where you find fulfillment. Is it in marriage, companionship? Maybe it's in the freedom of being single and having the time to focus on yourself. Whatever it is, know that it's valid and worth celebrating, no matter what society might tell you. As we age, we gain a kind of wisdom that allows us to see beyond the traditional markers of success or happiness. We understand that life isn't about following a set path, but about creating our own. And whether that path includes marriage, companionship, or something else entirely, the important thing is that it's your path. Let's break this stigma together. Whether you choose to remarry, stay single, or just enjoy life with a partner, the key is to follow your own heart and do what makes you feel fulfilled. Society might have its opinions, but at the end of the day, your happiness is what matters most. All right, let's move on to our final segment, where we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways and reflect on everything we've talked about today. Segment 5, key takeaways. We've covered so much today. We've explored marriage, companionship, and everything in between. And I hope you've come away feeling more empowered, to make choices that feel right for you. Whether you're the team marriage, team companionship, or maybe even a little bit of both. What matters most is that you're true to yourself and what brings you happiness in this phase of your life. Before we wrap up, let's go over some key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, marriage and companionship means different things to different people. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to relationships, especially after 50. Some people see marriage as the ultimate expression of commitment, while others find deep fulfillment in companionship without the legalities of marriage. And that's okay. It's important to remember that whatever choice you make is about what feels authentic to you. Number 2, emotional needs evolve. One thing that becomes very clear in our discussions today is that emotional needs evolve over time. What we may have wanted in our 20s or 30s may no longer be what we seek after 50. It's less about societal expectations and more about what truly brings us peace, joy, and fulfillment at this stage in our lives. Number 3, the practical side matters. While love and companionship are key, there's also a practical side to consider. Legal, financial, and healthcare considerations do play a role, especially as we age. For some, marriage makes sense because of these practical factors, while others prefer to keep things simple and stay as partners without the formalities. The important thing is to balance what makes sense practical with what makes sense emotionally. Number 4, social perception is shifting. This is one of the most exciting takeaways from today. Society views on relationships after 50 are changing. The pressure to get married or to be in a certain type of relationship is fading. Whether you choose to marry, enjoy companionship without marriage, or even stay single, it's about what makes you feel fulfilled and happy. We're seeing a beautiful shift where people over 50 are living life on their own terms, and that's something to celebrate. To wrap it up, let me share one final story from Jane. She said, at 60, I remarried and it was the best decision for me. But that doesn't mean it's the best for everyone. I am a firm believer in doing what brings you joy. Jane's story reminds us that while remarriage may bring happiness to some, it's not the only path to fulfillment. What's great about being over 50 is that you have the wisdom and experience to know what's truly important to you. For Jane, that meant saying I do again. But for others, it might mean something entirely different, and that's perfectly okay. The key takeaway here is that you get to choose what works for you. You get to decide what makes your life rich, meaningful, and joyous. And finally, there's Sam, who's been with his partner for 15 years without ever getting married. He told me, we don't need a wedding to define our love. What we have is special, just as it is. Sam's story is another beautiful example of how love and commitment don't always require a wedding or a marriage certificate. For some, simply being together and sharing a life is enough. And after all, isn't that what matters most? Whether or not you walk down the aisle, it's the connection, the companionship, and the love that makes the relationship meaningful. Sam and his partner have found something special without the need for traditional formalities, and that's just as valid and fulfilling as any marriage. Before I end this episode, I need to be transparent about where I am and what part of this spectrum I'm on. This month marks the 10th year I've been divorced. I don't date much. I didn't start dating until my daughter had gotten out of high school. But with the dating pool that I ran into, I'm fine being myself and doing me. I've had this conversation with friends before. I think if I got into a serious relationship with someone and it looked like we could possibly get married, I'm not opposed to living in two different homes or at least have double masters because I've grown to love my space and my me time. Yes, I have grown to love my time and my space. So I guess I'm on the side of companionship for now. We'll see how that pans out later. Thank you so much to all our listeners for sharing their stories today. I know that these personal experiences resonate with so many of us, and it's a reminder that there's no right or wrong way to approach relationships at any stage of life, especially after 50. Whether you choose marriage or companionship, it's all about what makes your heart sing, what brings you peace, and what helps you feel connected. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Society's views on relationships are evolving, but the most important opinion is your own. So ask yourself, what do I truly want in this stage of my life? If you've enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to do a few things. First, give us a 5-star rating if you're listening on a platform that allows it. Your reviews help more people discover the podcast and join this amazing community of empowered individuals. Second, share this episode with your friends, especially those who might be thinking about these same questions regarding marriage or companionship after 50. Let's keep spreading these important conversations and letting others know they're not alone in their journey. And of course, don't forget to head over to the blog at EnergizeURPassion.com for more inspiration and empowerment. There you'll find more articles, stories, and advice on living life with passion, no matter your age or relationship status. Finally, let's keep the conversation going on social media. I love to hear from you. What does marriage or companionship mean to you after 50? You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, where we're always continuing these discussions. Your insights and stories are what makes this podcast so special. So don't be shy by sharing them with us. Until next time, my friends, stay energized, stay passionate, and most importantly, stay true to yourself. This is Sunshine, signing off.